Thank you so much, Dr. Kutcher, for reminding us that leadership is a process that occurs with others. It does not occur in isolation. And I've learned that seasoned leaders really understand that building cohesive teams that work synchronously with each other is really vital for outcomes and for learning, and
Yeah.
that it can't be done alone. So thank you for really honing in on that. With that said, I'm sure you've worked with quite a few teams in your time. And so whether it be a long-term or a short-term project, what are some of the steps that you take to build relationships and build that team camaraderie?
Yeah, I've been in all kinds of teams and all different types of roles in those teams. And I've seen some teams work really well. And then I've seen some teams that work well, even in spite of the kind of start that you have. But one thing that I like to do now, and I really meant it, I really mean it when I say that a shared vision, some kind of compelling direction or mission is one of the most important things to keep a group going. I like to spend as much time getting to that point in the first couple of meetings as possible. So I really love those first getting to know you types of meetings in the beginning. By the time you've gotten there, you've either recruited some people to be part of the team that you know are on the same page, or you realize the importance of those early meetings to establish what that common mission is. And I think that early in that process, it's a good idea. Sometimes it's really obvious, what the mission, what the vision, or what the direction of a group should be. And sometimes, even if it's obvious, though, I think it still takes, I think it's still important to say it out loud and to all get on the same page, to establish it, to make it official. So, one thing that I like to do in the beginning is start by asking everybody, and it used to be on index cards. These days we do it by text a lot of times, where but to ask people, like, as succinctly as you can say it, what is the mission? What is the reason why we're here? And then everybody sends it in. And I might have the right answer. Like if I'm facilitating the group, I might have that, and I'm doing air quotes here if you're not, but the right answer to that. And then as I read what texts are coming in, I kind of qualify it a little, flesh it out a little bit, explain a little bit more about how what I thought as a mission is all the things that people are telling me, are true. If it's about, they're adding a time element to it, or some, adjectives to describe, some qualifiers to describe how we're doing, why we're doing. But then I'll announce and I'll say, the good thing is that here we all are, and we agree that this is the reason why we're together, whether it's, creating a new curriculum or, whatever is the purpose why we're here. And then I'll move in, I think it's important after you get through that why phase to move on to the who. And an activity that I like to do there is something that I guess I didn't always call it this, but it's like a share, offer, help activity, where, okay, now that we're all clear about what the mission is that we've got, that we're working towards together, and we're all committed that we want to be working in the same direction. The next step I do is acknowledge that we all come at it from a different point of view. We all have our own set of experiences. We have our own strengths. We have our own position within the structure of the team or the organization. And also we have a way that we approach teamwork. Like all of us, whether it is in a, in the workplace, or whether it's on a school project that we're in, we all tend to have the same behaviors or a role that we play within a group. So, I ask everyone to think about all of those things, how they approach the teamwork. And now think, if you were to pair yourself off with every other member that's part of this team, and this is an activity we do, find one thing that the two of you share in common in relation to that mission. So maybe it's that you both have been part of the same organization in the past. You both have access to the same information or resources. What do you have? What's one thing you have in common? And then what's one thing from your point of view that you can offer to the other person in servicing that mission? And then what's the other thing that you could really use as help? Something that you can ask the other team member. Here's something based on what you've told me about. What's a way that I could really use your help on something? So it's the share and offer and help idea. What we do is when we walk away from that, and sometimes depending on how many people there are, how much time we have, how crazy this sounds, we go through every single pair of people in that group. If you're on a 4-person team, it makes a lot of sense to know how you and I, Laura, if we're, how we, what it is we have in common, what it is that I could really learn from you, or what it is that I might be able to offer. And if we do that and, everybody watches, we really have a good sense of how teamy this team can be, how much we can each offer something to each other, how we can really work together within the structure in servicing what the mission or the direction of the group. Obviously, if it's a much larger team, then we break out and we do it smaller. But that's one of these types of exercises, and I'm going on a little bit, but just to describe, like in some of these earliest meetings, how important it is just to slow down and take some time to really establish some, I guess what facilitators might call like ground rules, or group dynamics people might call it like norms of behavior, or we can all tell each other what we expect of each other. Because once we've established it, you can always call on it again. If you never establish it, it's really hard to try to pretend in the future like you have some shared idea of what our values are, or some shared idea of why we're working together in the first place. So those early meetings, I think, are so important. So when you asked that question, I smiled because I thought, this is how we should be thinking, and not like it's ever too late. You can always go, it just might take a little bit more work. But I like thinking about those things early if you can, when you have a new team, so that that why and the who and the how is established pretty early.
Like you said, do it when the energy's fresh. Do it before any conflict has arisen, because conflict may arise at some point. And build that foundation. Get to know those people that you're working with on a more unique individual level, so that, like you said, what they value, what they care about, and why they're there. I think it's a great place to start. And a lot of people skip that step. So I thank you for really honing in on that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So as you know, with teams, and with whether it be through classwork or teams that we're on as faculty or administrators, we don't often get the chance to choose our teammates, right? Our teammates are typically sometimes, teams that are provided for us, and whether it's random or we're chosen from different departments to bring diversity. But every once in a while, and I know students have said this to me, in classwork, and part of the reason why they don't like group work is because of conflict that arises of some team members that might not have that strong of a commitment to the team or to the class, that they're not supporting the efforts of the team. What might be some of your advice for how people can navigate through that?
Yeah. My first answer, which is probably only going to be so helpful if you're already experiencing this idea, is like build those into the upfront discussions too. Like make it part of maybe some of the upfront discussions. Okay, we're realists here. We're going to have the expectation that there's a conflict that's going to come up, and how can we handle it? I have some ideas maybe as a facilitator, but I want to know, what for you in the past has worked in terms of resolving a conflict, or, is there anybody who really just disagrees with this vision off the beat, right at the outset? Is there anybody who doesn't think that this is worthwhile, worth our time or our talents, or you feel like you're a bad fit or can't contribute to that part of the team? So first, I'll just get that out of the way by saying, let's make it part of those upfront discussions. The second thing I'll say is that some of the best teams I've had, just in terms of attitude here, some of the best teams I've ever had are ones that it would not have been people that I didn't know before, or people who I wasn't sure what I had to offer if I was going to be in the team with them. Some of that uncertainty, and I think that there can be a lot of value in meeting brand new people. You might misunderstand what some people that you've known for a really long time have to bring to the table. And on the flip side, you might not realize how well you could work with somebody new if you didn't know them. So I'm all for being plopped into the middle of a team that, that I didn't choose. And I think that's, I try to tell that story to some students too, who might argue sometimes if I'm teaching a class, for example, and say like, I'd like to choose my own group. But so you think you do, but there might be some benefit to not. But I also have a little discussion that I go through about the perils of groupthink and how dangerous it can be when we try so hard just to be, collaborative and cohesive, to the point where we only want to hear from people who agree with us.
Mm.
You know, so there's different kinds, there's different sources of conflict. Of course, you'd have to go back to figure out, is somebody just not willing to contribute, not wanting to put their time and just looking to, you know, coast on the good nature and the work of other people? Or is it that there's truly a disagreement? Like, do they not think we're moving in the right direction? The second one is a lot easier to work with, because you can say, well, I don't know, easy, but it's healthy, you know, where you can say, a danger of working in a team that's going so well is that we stop identifying when we disagree, when we're just too easy to go along with the group because we want to keep the status quo, you know. And that whole idea of groupthink could be pretty dangerous, and to the point where a lot of times, and I'm sure you've done this before, is appoint people to be a devil's advocate or to be the voice of dissension, just so that we hear the voice and can react to the voice. And whether we reaffirm, okay, you know, we're doing the right thing, we're making the right choices, we're going down the right road, or whether you say, okay, you know, maybe this person is right, you know, maybe we're not considering all the risk that's there. Or so what I like to do is let that be one of those norms that we set up ahead of time. Like, there's going to be people who disagree, we want to hear it, and then depending, like sometimes if I'm like in a formal leadership, or if I just want to learn more, I might ask to speak to the person and say, you know, where's the source of the problem? Do we think is it with, are we not really working towards the same mission? Do we not agree that that's what we should be working towards? You know, and then that has a certain you know, path that you then would start to talk about, or you know, or what specifically you disagree with, because there's probably some value that we could all hear, as long as it's said in a healthy way. You know, so I guess it's all about the source of what that conflict is. And most of sources of conflict, I think, could be really healthy, you know, if managed well, you know, and probably really dangerous if avoided.
Well, and I appreciate your prompting to confront the issue at hand, to discuss it, because again, that's the process of learning in a group or a team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also not prejudging why a person might be checking out. You know, ask them, you know, what's going on in your life? What are some other commitments that you have? What are some ways we can help you? Is it that you're not enjoying the work? Is it that there's an interpersonal
Mhm.
issue with some of the other team members? So I do think, you know, whether you're in a titled role or not, being a leader means asking those questions and being curious and not prejudging. So I definitely appreciate that. And with that said, um, obviously as a team, you want to produce some sort of result, but the process is so rich in the learning, right? And so it's important for us to, when we're working with others, especially once we've completed a project with a team, to reflect back on what we've learned, right? And to think about that process and to think about how we can utilize that learning to move
Yep.
forward. So what are some ways that you have as suggestions for teams to reflect upon their experiences and grow, so that they're able to utilize that information to take with them to the next team?
Yeah. Like, I think in most things that we're doing, there's, no matter where you sit, what in an organization or as part of a group, or no matter where you are, there's a couple different goals we're working. There's the surface level goals, you know, whatever the business goal is, whatever the stated goal is, whatever the mission that we talked about before is, you know, that's going to be front and center. But then there's always another one, Laura, that you just kind of hit on. And that idea is the learning part,
Mhm.
or the relating part, you know, or now I've had a, you know, a solid work experience, collaborative experience that brought me something else. You know, it was part of my overall engagement, or, you know, I feel like I've learned something from these colleagues, you know, and that we've all been invested in something. And there's something about how we engage with work that way. We bring all of ourselves to the project that we're on. Um, and a good portion of that is not the work related part. You know, it's more how we grow as a person, as a professional, our confidence, our belongingness, you know, our, how we're relating to others. And so if we see that as a goal in how we perform, like even in like intro management courses, there's always, yes, there's always a business goal, but you're also developing your team members. You know, you're always making sure that they are having an engaging work experience. That, I mean, I think that that's part of the goal too. And if I'm on a team, I'm looking to learn as much as I can from other members that I'm there. Otherwise, I could be doing work completely solo. So there's that should be a parallel purpose to working together here, is learning as much as I can from each other and how to work in a good group going forward. So I think that it's healthy to take, I don't know what it is, if it's every fourth meeting that we're having, or if it's a once a month, but dedicate that just to being, let's reflect on where we've been since the last time we talked about working together in the meetings and outside of the meetings. Reflect on what it is that we're learning. If we did some kind of activity like I mentioned before, how do you think you can learn from each other better now than you ever could have anticipated in that share, help, activity in the beginning? What do you now know better about your team members? What shorthand do you have with people because now you've gotten to know them and what they're good at, what they offer, or what can you offer to somebody now because you get a lay of the land better, that, you have a context, you have a history that you didn't have. I think it's so valuable, and if you think of half of why we're together is just to learn how to be better professionals, better leaders, better team members, more collaborative, more helpful to each other. How can I serve the people that I work with a little bit better? Then those discussions mean everything. So, build it into the agenda, build it into the project plan, that this is as valuable a use of our time, and it's not about the touchy-feely part of who we are as team members. It's as much about the business part, to stop and say, how can we be more efficient going forward by acknowledging these things? So wherever you're coming from, in terms of your orientation towards working together as a team, I still think that that's helpful and a good use of time.
And I appreciate the intention behind it and the thought that's put into it. Again, it doesn't just necessarily happen. It needs to be thought out. It needs to be built in, like you said. So thank you for that sage advice. Thank you for sharing some of your experience and your wisdom. Any final pieces or nuggets of advice that you want to share with those watching today that would help them move forward in working better with teams?
Yes, thank you. I think about, when you're learning, or when you're first kind of trying on a new role of any kind, you kind of think about the people that you've experienced before you. So I think about some of the role models, that I've had. And I remember, I guess when teaching some management courses, I went back to my very first boss I ever had. And it happened to be a Rider alum, just incidentally. And I went back and I said, and I told her all of the things that as a manager that she did that I appreciated, and how she's still the best boss that I've ever had. And I think that that's important too, by the way, for people to go and let those role models that they have know that they've been role models for them, I think is great practice. But also, what I grew into was learning how my style is different from hers, so it's just copying somebody else will get you so far, that kind of copy, what I'm saying, where you're imitating the role models, that's what you're supposed to do with role models. But at a certain point, you kind of realize that you're now owning the role a little bit more. You're living in it, and you have something different to offer, and you're probably now setting a model for other people who you're working with at this point. So I guess, I don't know if there's advice in there necessarily, but it's, I think it's identify those people and how they made you feel and how they made you a better professional, a team worker, more whatever, more ethical, more responsible, more efficient, and let them know that, give them the feedback. I think giving feedback, that's part of that reflection session, is really asking people for feedback about how you're doing without making yourself the center of attention. But now it's like going back and giving that feedback, I think, to people who've helped you, and then knowing it's time to leave some of those practices behind and become your own leader, your authentic, your most authentic type of leader that you can be. So I think there's probably some advice in there that'll help.
I think there is, for sure. And with that said, once again, thank you so much for sharing such a valuable leadership lesson with our Rider community. We really appreciate the time that you took to do this for us.
And it is truly my pleasure. Thank you for everything that you do, Laura.
Thank you.